chair recognizes herself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. I am pleased to support this bipartisan legislation, which will make sure we work through a checklist of to-do items before completing the IANA transition. For the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance to work, we need transparency, credibility, and accountability. We still don't have that with ICANN. That's why there is growing consensus that the IANA transition is not yet ready for prime time. One thing in particular that concerns me is that ICANN, the registries, and the registrars are not abiding by sections 3, 7, 3, 18, and 3A in their own public interest commitments and the registrar accreditation agreement. These contractual provisions created through the multi-stakeholder process require ICANN, the registries, and the registrars to prohibit domain name holders from engaging in illegal activity, such as distributing malware, abusively operating botnets, phishing, piracy, trademark, or copyright infringement, fraudulent or deceptive practices, counterfeiting, or otherwise engaging in activity contrary to applicable law. They must investigate claims of infringement and take action for such behavior, including, in some cases, suspension of the domain name. ICANN says it should not be the content police, and I agree, but that's not the issue. Before signing off on the transition, we must make sure that ICANN is enforcing provisions in its own contracts. I believe this bill requires the NTIA to certify that this is occurring before the transition takes place. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time, and I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
I want to thank Chairwoman Blackburn. First, let me ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this opening statement of Representative Eshoo.
So ordered.
I'm pleased that the full committee is moving quickly to advance the bipartisan agreement we reached in the Communications and Technology Subcommittee on H.R. 805, the DOTCOM Act. The bill received unanimous support in the subcommittee and has been endorsed by numerous stakeholders, including the Internet Association, the Internet Governance Coalition, and the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. Tomorrow we'll offer a bipartisan manager's amendment that makes a simple technical change to the bill we approved in the subcommittee, and I urge all my colleagues to support it. The DOTCOM Act continues the longstanding congressional support for the global open internet while appropriately conducting oversight of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I believe our bill provides the necessary safeguards for the timely transition of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or IANA. As I've said before, our approach in the DOTCOM Act is a far better alternative to blocking NTIA's ability to implement the transition through an appropriations bill. I'm committed to working with my colleagues to see the DOTCOM Act becomes law and removes the funding limitation that was included in the House Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill. To that end, I want to thank our colleagues on the Senate Commerce Committee who've introduced a companion bill to the DOTCOM Act. I also wanted to commend Chairman Walden and Representative Shimkus for working with us on this bill. You've heard me say before that we're most successful when our work is truly bipartisan, and the DOTCOM Act is the perfect case in point. I look forward to working with all of you to get this bill to the President's desk as soon as possible, and I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
The gentleman yields back. At this time, Mr. Shimkus, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Blackburn, for holding today's markup, and thank you to my colleagues on the subcommittee for the unanimous support of this legislation. This legislation is a great example, as Ranking Member Pallone said, of what we can do when we work together in a bipartisan fashion, and I really appreciate all the great work staff did on making this happen. We would not be here today without Chairman Upton, Chairman Walden, Ranking Members Pallone, and Eshoo. The DOTCOM Act is our best way forward to ensuring Congress can exercise a meaningful and appropriate oversight role in the IANA stewardship transition. In the short, the legislation requires NTIA to renew their contract with ICANN before it expires in September. And I want to reiterate, that's a very, very important aspect of this. that the contract gets renewed. Everyone agrees that the contract should remain with NTIA while this process moves forward. DOTCOM is the vehicle to make sure this does in fact happen. Extending the contract takes the pressure off of making a rushed transition and perhaps making mistakes. We get one bite at the apple on this, and we need to make sure it's done correctly. From there, as Chairman Blackburn stated, the DOTCOM Act will hold NTIA accountable to their word by requiring them to certify that all their conditions for the transfer are met and that ICANN has adopted the necessary bylaw changes. Congress will then have 30 legislative days to review the proposal and NTIA's report. If everything checks out, the transition can move forward without further delay. If legitimate concerns remain, we can take additional legislative action at that time. This is an important moment for the Internet, but there's no moving back into mom and dad's basement if it doesn't work out. We only have one chance to get this right. So I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the DOTCOM Act so we can move forward in a thoughtful and a responsible way. And with that, Madam Chairman, I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Bilirakis, you are recognized for 3 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Appreciate it very much. The DOTCOM Act is an important piece of legislation. We must ensure that the Internet that we know, love, and depend on remains a vibrant and open marketplace for goods and ideas. The bill is a bipartisan product of years of hard work on an issue that could have disastrous consequences if left uncontrolled. With swift passage of this legislation, we will ensure that the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or IANA, will continue to be governed in a responsible and reasonable manner. I applaud the work that Representative Shimkus, Chairman Walden, and Ranking Member Pallone have put into this piece of legislation. This bill will guarantee an important transition will be done properly and with necessary oversight. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back his time. The chair calls up H.R. 805 as forwarded by the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 805 to prohibit the National Telecommunications and Information Administration from relinquishing responsibility over the Internet domain name system until the Comptroller General of the United States submits to Congress a report on the role of the NTIA with respect to such system.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. We are now on H.R. 805, and the committee will reconvene at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I remind members that the chair will give priority recognition to bipartisan agreements, and I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. We are in recess.